In every person's life, there comes a moment when they begin to ponder the extent of their influence on the world around them. Have you ever noticed how some individuals, without resorting to yelling or persuasion, can cause significant changes in others' behavior simply by withdrawing? The energy around them seems to shift, compelling others to experience doubt and longing. Imagine what would happen if you stopped reacting immediately to every event, preferring silence over automatic responses, and withdrawal over emotional outbursts. This is the essence of change. When a person ceases to be constantly available emotionally, physically, and psychologically, the world around them can enter a state of crisis. This occurs because others have grown accustomed to controlling them through predictable reactions and impulses. However, when the decision is made to withdraw, the rules of the game change dramatically. Those who believe they knew this person well suddenly realize that their knowledge of them is superficial and incomplete. Carl Jung once observed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. It's worth considering. Who feels despair when you become unavailable? Who gets irritated and tries to provoke an emotional reaction from you? This speaks more about them than about you, and reveals how much you are still being manipulated, even if you don't realize it. By continuing to give yourself away to please others, maintain peace, or hold on to people who don't truly value you, with every forced agreement, every immediate response, and every emotional reaction, you lose a piece of your energy. And what is left at the end of the day? Exhaustion, disappointment, and an inexplicable emptiness. This happens because you are too available to those who don't deserve even a moment of your silence. The point is not to abandon this world, but to choose yourself. It's about mastering the process that Carl Jung called individuation, the pursuit of wholeness, authenticity, and completeness of the self. This path begins with the realization that silence sometimes outweighs any argument, and conscious withdrawal, not as an escape from problems, but as a display of strength. Thus, the question arises, how long will a person remain under the sway of others' emotions, like a puppet twitching at every touch to their vulnerabilities? Perhaps it's time to cut these strings, withdraw, and become an enigma. For when a person ceases to be easily accessible, the world around them transforms. From childhood, people are taught to always be connected, to react quickly, to please, to agree, even when they want to object. The idea is instilled that a person's worth is determined by their availability to others. But the truth, which is not always openly stated, is that excessive availability is not a virtue, but a true prison. As long as a person believes it's necessary to be constantly available, emotionally or physically, they will be manipulated, their resources depleted, and they will be forgotten as soon as they cease to be useful. The reason is that relentless availability turns a person into an easily predictable figure, and everything predictable inevitably becomes a means to achieve others' goals. Those around them begin to perceive such a person as an emotional button, which they press when they desperately need attention, seek relief from emotional pain, or crave validation of their own significance, only to then unceremoniously put them back on the shelf. Meanwhile, the person themselves, trapped in the illusion that their constant presence in others' lives will be reciprocated, often does not realize what is happening. As the eminent psychologist Carl Jung noted, people tend to don a persona, a mask designed to secure acceptance, love, and recognition in society. It is this mask that makes a person excessively available to others. They get used to saying everything is fine, even when they are choking with despair and pain, instantly replying to messages despite exhaustion, constantly explaining their actions, justifying themselves, and defending themselves, as if they owe something to the whole world. However, as practice shows, the more often a person assigns themselves the role of an extra on someone else's stage, the faster they fade into the shadows, losing themselves. Relentless availability is a veiled form of self-denial, a disguised way to earn others' approval, avoid rejection, and attempt to control the impression they make on others. But such control comes at a high price, the loss of inner peace. Life energy, which is by no means limitless, is thoughtlessly expended, as if its reserves were inexhaustible. Some people's desire for others' constant availability stems not from genuine attachment to the individual, but rather from a wish to exploit the resources that person provides, validation of their own significance, companionship, an escape from problems, and emotional support. However, when a person begins to change, setting personal boundaries and refusing to respond immediately to requests, those same people show irritation, accusing them of being strange and distant. The reason for this behavior lies not in a change in the person themselves, but in the fact that they have ceased to fulfill their customary function of serving others' needs. Paradoxically, the more available a person becomes, the less they are valued by others. This is because an abundance of anything devalues it in the eyes of others. No one respects what is given without effort, and no one values what is always readily available. In this regard, an important question arises: who truly deserves our time, attention, presence, and willingness to listen? And, just as importantly, who deserves our absence? Before answering these questions, it is necessary to understand the reasons behind our tendency to overreact to external stimuli. What lies behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please others? The answer to this question lies in the concept of psychic energy, introduced by Carl Jung, and this topic will be explored in detail in the next part of the narrative. A person's energy is their primary resource, and the ability to protect it becomes vital. Otherwise, there will be those who wish to exploit it for their own ends. Carl Jung, a prominent researcher of the human psyche, saw it not merely as a mechanism automatically reacting to external stimuli. He compared the mind to an energy system, where every thought, every feeling, and every action requires an expenditure of energy. It is important to understand who controls this energy, the individual or the outside world. Every impulsive reaction is an irrational waste of psychic energy. Defending against baseless criticism, responding to provocations to prove one's point, engaging in pointless arguments, trying to please those who don't value you, a person expends their inner strength on what brings no benefit. Jung emphasized, resistance only amplifies the problem. The more active the reaction, the stronger the attachment to the situation. People experiencing emotional exhaustion are not weak. They simply don't know how to properly direct their energy. Exhaustion makes a person vulnerable, turning them into easy prey. Manipulators, opportunists, and emotionally dependent individuals sense this vulnerability. They notice a person's inability to conserve their energy, their tendency to react to everything, and their desire to save the world, and they shamelessly use this to their advantage. Carl Jung, an eminent researcher of the human psyche, asserted that the key to mental health is an individual's ability to conserve energy within their own psychological system. This implies the ability to firmly refuse without experiencing agonizing guilt, the capacity to remain silent without feeling cowardly, and the art of careful observation preceding any action. True personal strength lies not in impulsively reacting to external stimuli, but in consciously choosing the moment and method of action. Such awareness becomes possible only through deep self-knowledge that allows one to recognize their own inner impulses. Remember how many sleepless nights were spent in fruitless contemplation of unresolved conflicts? How many hours were wasted pondering missed remarks or making futile attempts to understand the reasons behind someone's unkind behavior? All of this is irretrievably lost energy. A person sustains the existence of ghosts from the past that should have long vanished, and fuels destructive tendencies that persist only because they insistently demand answers. Psychic energy is like a powerful force field surrounding an individual. When it is securely protected, it creates a strong presence. A person enters a room and commands respect simply by their presence, without uttering a single word. However, when this energy is managed inefficiently, the individual becomes vulnerable, reactive, and virtually invisible to others, and the world, as is known, shows no leniency to those easily swayed by external influences. So, start closely monitoring your own triggers. What specific situations or words make you act on autopilot? What throws you off balance, deprives you of inner equilibrium? It is in these vulnerable areas that your life energy leaks, and it is on these aspects that you must work meticulously. The goal here is not to turn into an unfeeling and indifferent person, but to gain the ability to consciously choose your reactions, to become the full master of yourself. And here, one of Carl Jung's most profound revelations comes into play. By conserving your energy, you dismantle the projections that others try to impose on you. And this discovery can cause significant unease, as it plunges us into the dark waters of hidden manipulation. In the following narrative, we will explore how unscrupulous individuals feed on your energy, and why your inner impenetrability completely disarms their manipulative games. Prepare to confront those who have constantly drained you, even without your awareness. You may be confident that you control the situation, genuinely believing that your reactions are the result of conscious choice. But the truth is far more unpleasant. Most of your emotional reactions are predetermined, programmed. And those who understand this can easily manipulate you. Opportunistic individuals don't need to raise their voices, resort to threats, or forcefully push events. They simply press the very buttons you inadvertently left exposed, and you invariably react in a predictable manner. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung defined projection as a psychological process in which individuals unconsciously transfer qualities and traits they cannot recognize or accept within themselves onto others. However, this complex phenomenon has another, less obvious side. While some people project their internal conflicts and unrealized desires onto others, the latter, in turn, become unwitting carriers of these projections. The more open and emotionally available a person is, the more they risk becoming a blank canvas upon which others paint their fantasies and expectations. Recall that friend who only remembers your existence during times of personal crisis, or the partner who constantly needs your help to solve problems. Think about the person who lavishes you with praise, but only as long as you remain useful in achieving their goals. All these situations are not accidental. In such cases, people build relationships not with the real person, but with an idealized image, with the role that the person agrees to play. Why do people allow themselves to be used in such a way? Often, it is out of fear of disappointing, losing love, or being rejected. The most sophisticated manipulations rarely manifest in open conflicts and shouting. They flourish in the silence of guilt, when a person feels obligated to another, believes they must always be available, ready to help and understand, even if it destroys them from within. The essence of manipulation is not total control over another person, but maintaining a habitual reaction. The manipulator merely seeks for the victim to continue reacting in a predictable manner. However, when this reaction changes, when a person begins to say no, to respond with silence, or to withdraw instead of justifying themselves, the projections lose their power. The mask they were made to wear begins to slip, throwing the manipulator into confusion, as they no longer understand who is before them. What's worse, they are forced to look in the mirror and see their own flaws and unfulfilled needs. And not everyone is ready for that. When a person becomes unavailable, it is perceived by others as a challenge, as it forces them to confront their own inner emptiness. The ensuing silence exposes the inner chaos that people usually try to avoid. As a result, a negative reaction may follow, criticism or an emotional outburst. The reason for this lies not in the person's mistaken actions, but in the fact that they have ceased to function as a convenient mirror reflecting others' expectations. As Carl Jung noted, enlightenment comes not from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. When a person withdraws and stops fueling the habitual cycle of interaction, the shadow side of other people comes to the surface. This becomes unbearable for those accustomed to using them as a means of escape from themselves. However, is the person themselves ready to endure the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked for asserting their own boundaries? Do they have the strength to bear the silence that follows the breaking of old ties? For it is in this silence that a new strength emerges. Next, we will discuss why silence can become a powerful weapon capable of fundamentally altering a person's relationships with the world around them. In today's world, where everyone strives to be heard, to respond promptly, and to prevail in fruitless arguments, defending their position even at the cost of inner equilibrium, there exists a powerful force that few recognize and even fewer master. The power of silence. This is not about passive or cowardly silence, but about conscious, strategic, and insightful silence. It is a silence that represents not an absence, but a heightened presence. Carl Jung viewed silence not as emptiness, but as fertile ground for deep inner transformations. When a person stops automatically reacting to external stimuli, they gain the opportunity to observe. And in the process of observation, they reveal patterns that previously escaped their attention, emotional repetitions, manipulative tactics, and cycles of self-destruction. Silence fosters clarity of mind, and clarity poses a threat to those who seek to control others. Many have surely noticed how some people show discomfort when they don't receive a response, when a person doesn't explain their actions, or simply disappears from view. The reason for this lies not in longing for the specific person, but in the fact that their silence deprives them of the ability to control the situation. As long as a person is engaged in conversation, they remain in the game by others' rules. But when they fall silent, they change the rules of the game, which throws off balance those accustomed to living off others' reactions. True silence is not merely the absence of sounds. It is, first and foremost, the ability to manage one's own life energy. It is a conscious refusal to engage in others' emotional experiences. It is a wise decision not to waste energy on pointless conflicts and arguments. Carl Jung asserted that the process of individuation, that is, the unveiling of one's true self, requires a certain distance from the outside world, because only in silence can one hear the voice of their own soul, undisturbed by the noise of others' opinions and judgments. However, one should not be under any illusions. Silence comes at a price. It will inevitably lead to estrangement from those who valued you solely for the role you played. It will make you incomprehensible to those accustomed to seeing in you only a reflection of their own perceptions and expectations. You may appear cold, aloof, and even arrogant. But all of this is merely the reaction of those who never sought to understand your inner essence, but saw you merely as a tool to achieve their own goals. And here is the harsh truth of life. The deeper you delve into the process of self-discovery and self-improvement, the more discerning you become in your choice of words. You begin to understand that every uttered sentence is a kind of energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your inner truth. At certain moments, silence is not an escape from problems, but a manifestation of inner strength and independence. It is the language of those who no longer need constant validation of their worth and significance. Awkward silence forces a person to confront the flow of their own thoughts and feelings. This discomfort often reveals much more about them than any words could. The absence of explanations, in this case, becomes a self-sufficient statement. Those who feel threatened by silence inadvertently demonstrate their dependence on others' imbalance, which they need to maintain control. However, the most valuable silence is not that which causes confusion in others, but that which contributes to inner restoration. It is a state of peace that allows one to connect with something deeper, independent of external validation. It is in this inner space, free from external demands and expectations, that the restoration of life energy and a reunion with one's true essence occurs. In further discussion, the topic will be addressed that it is not enough to simply shield oneself from external noise. One must learn to consciously manage their energy, directing it towards truly important things, avoiding the senseless expenditure of emotional strength. It's time to learn discernment regarding one's own soul. It's pointless to grasp all these truths intellectually if, in real life, one continues to automatically agree when their soul protests, respond to messages that only cause annoyance, waste time on meaningless conversations, and cling to relationships devoid of sincerity and sustained only by habit. Awareness without active implementation is merely another illusion, a self-deception that leads to no real change. True personal transformation begins with a firm intention to become more discerning in their connections and actions. And this, in turn, requires considerable emotional resilience and self-control. Conscious unavailability is by no means a display of coldness, arrogance, or indifference towards others. It is, rather, a refusal to be constantly connected for everyone, ready to respond to every whim. It is the ability to take control of one's own energetic resources, manage one's time, and protect one's inner peace. And the path to this begins with small, but important steps. Not replying to messages instantly, allowing oneself time to think. Taking a deep breath before impulsively reacting to a situation. Knowing when to disengage from an argument, not allowing oneself to be drawn into emotional chaos. Turning off one's phone without feeling guilty towards anyone. Learning to say, not today, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to get involved. But most importantly, there is no need to justify your unavailability. There is no need to explain your silence or refusal. One owes nothing to anyone but themselves. And for many around them, this becomes unforgivable, because by refusing to explain their actions, a person deprives others of the power to keep them in the accustomed emotional script, where they are always ready to serve, understand, and help. In Carl Jung's understanding, the process of individuation inevitably passes through a period of alienation, yet this is not the isolation that leads to despondency, but rather a sacred solitude. A time for deep introspection and the restoration of the ability to hear one's own inner voice, undisturbed by the external world. During this period, a reevaluation of one's own identity occurs, where the personality is formed, relying not on the opinions of others, but on their own beliefs and values. An interesting indicator of personal growth can be observing the reactions of those around you. Notice who begins to distance themselves when you seek solitude and self-knowledge. Pay attention to who tries to provoke an emotional reaction from you when you remain calm and composed. Listen to those who accuse you of changing when you start asserting your interests. Such manifestations are not signs of a mistaken path, but rather evidence of liberation from external influence. Initially, the state of unavailability can cause inner discomfort. Feelings of guilt and thoughts of selfishness may haunt you, and criticism for being too strict may hurt. However, this is an integral part of the process of self-discovery and value reevaluation. For many years, perhaps, a person may have been accustomed to putting themselves last, so changes inevitably cause discomfort not only for the person themselves, but also for those who have benefited from their previous version. Deliberate unavailability becomes a cornerstone for self-identity formation. By refusing externally imposed scripts, the individual asserts their will and priorities. Withdrawing from destructive environments serves as confirmation of the value of inner equilibrium, which surpasses any artificial connections. Ceasing to justify one's actions commands respect, though not from everyone. However, not everyone is ready to accept such a position, as emotional distancing exposes hidden emotional wounds that many prefer not to confront. Such behavior demonstrates others' dependence on external emotional imbalance, which allowed them to feel in control. It is at this moment that a painful rupture occurs, accompanied by feelings of loneliness, alienation, and illusory loss. In reality, however, this is liberation from external influence. What happens after a period of withdrawal? What new horizons open up in silence? We will discuss the rebirth that becomes possible only when one has the courage to be misunderstood, to dwell in solitude, and to achieve wholeness. It is time to realize that the solitude of the strong-willed is the path to true freedom and self-realization. When a person ceases to be universally accessible, when they close the doors to their inner world to all comers, a mysterious process of transformation begins. The first act of this drama is silence. Not just silence, but a ringing, oppressive, almost palpable silence that echoes in the depths of consciousness. At this moment, doubts arise, soul-tormenting questions. Is this the right path? Are the demands on others too strict? Am I pushing away those who genuinely love me? However, over time, this oppressive silence begins to change. It seems to clear the mind of mental clutter, soothe raging emotions, and heal old wounds. Silence gives way to solitude. But this is not the wistful loneliness that arises from the absence of loved ones. It is a solitude of fullness, of complete presence in the moment, of awareness of one's own self-sufficiency. This is the lot of the strong-willed, those no longer willing to betray themselves to keep others. In this liberated space, where chaos and confusion once reigned, clarity suddenly appears. Where anxiety once swirled, serenity now reigns. And in place of the former need for approval and support, a new, incomparable strength grows, the power of inner wholeness. As the great Carl Jung said, the process of individuation, that is, becoming oneself, requires a person to separate from the collective unconscious, renounce social masks, and voluntarily retreat into solitude for a certain period. This is precisely what happens when a person decides to become unavailable. They do not flee from the world, they return to themselves. At this pivotal moment, they cease to be a passive reactor, responding to external stimuli, and transform into the creator of their own life. They are no longer shaped by circumstances, but begin to create their reality from within, based on their own values and beliefs. Those around who experience discomfort from someone's absence often demonstrate that what truly attracted them was not the person themselves, but the role that person played in their lives. And when the individual ceases to meet these expectations, they find themselves confused, unsure how to react. But this can be a liberating experience. Inevitably, some people will part ways, but in return, self-discovery will occur. There will be a distancing from certain places, but a reunion with one's true essence will emerge. There may be a period of misunderstanding from others, but ultimately, deserved respect will come. For when a person ceases to be available to everyone and everything, they become valuable, rare, and unforgettable. Make no mistake, this is nothing less than a rebirth, a new beginning, the start of a life where there is no longer room for emotional handouts, manipulation, and the emptiness hidden under the guise of attachment. Now, a person only accepts what resonates with their inner peace, their truth, and their wholeness. And if they have reached this moment, it means a part of their being is already ready for this new path. A part of their soul has already realized that being loved means nothing if it requires sacrificing oneself. And that true self-love begins with choosing yourself, even if it means spending some time alone.